This is Ian Cameron for Sportsbook Review, and I am looking at the Coastal Division in the ACC for the upcoming college football season. We talked about the Atlantic earlier this week. Now we're going to look at the Coastal Division here of the ACC for the upcoming season. Looking forward to breaking these teams down. Let's get right to business. Start with the Virginia Tech Hokies, and what a weird feeling it's going to be looking at the Hokies sideline this season and Frank Beamer's not there. We're talking about almost 30 years that Frank Beamer had been with the Virginia Tech program, no longer the head coach, retiring, of course, in the offseason, and now taken over by former Memphis Tigers head coach Justin Fuente. And if anybody knows about what it takes to make a program better, Justin Fuente might be that guy. He did a phenomenal job, completely resurrected a downtrodden Memphis football team when he took over. That team was in complete shambles. They weren't recruiting well. They weren't winning games. They didn't have high-level talent. They didn't have good quarterback play. Didn't have a good defense. They had the whole gamut of issues. Fuente came in, changed things up, and this is going to be a new-looking team now offensively that he's going to bring to Virginia Tech. Virginia Tech known as a pro-style offense. Running game is a big part of that offense. Now Fuente comes in. He's bringing in that more up-tempo spread offense that he was famous for with that Memphis team. So it's going to be a much different looking offense. The question now is going to be who's going to run that offense. Is it going to be Brandon Motley, who was the quarterback for most of last season for Virginia Tech, or are they going to go with maybe the JUCO transfer Jared Evans? A guy that maybe has more dual threat capability, a greater running ability, and that's usually a better fit for the spread type of offense that Fuente likes. So don't be surprised if Evans is the quarterback instead of Motley, even though Motley's the guy with more playing time and more experience for that Virginia Tech offense at quarterback. Offensive line should be solid with 4 starters back, quality unit there. Trayvon McMillan back at running back. Defense, very impressive to see that Justin Fuente did not bring in his own DC. He's keeping Bud Foster there, a holdover from the Frank Beamer era, knowing just what a great reputation Bud Foster's had for defense in years past with this Virginia Tech team. He decided, I'm going to keep this guy around. I respect him. I like what he does as a defensive coordinator. So Bud Foster's back. The defense had a ton of injuries last year, struggles. The secondary, though, should be great, loaded with playmakers. Defensive line, linebacking core should be upgraded, more experience at those 2 levels as well. And of course, Foster still being the DC means no learning curve in terms of a new system having to be implemented. So I like the looks of this Virginia Tech team. Justin Fuente's proven himself as a head coach to be a winner, and it would not surprise me to see Virginia Tech back on the map very quickly and competing for ACC titles. I think they're in the hunt to win this division, to be honest, Virginia Tech. I think they got that chance to be right there and compete with North Carolina, some of the other teams in this division. And speaking of North Carolina, let's move down to them. North Carolina looking to build on a turnaround season last year, 11-3. They took Clemson to the wire in the ACC title game before losing 45-37. North Carolina 2 years ago had a brutal defense, just awful on that side of the football. Couldn't stop the pass, couldn't stop the run. They bring in Gene Chizik as the new defensive coordinator last year, and automatically that defense got a lot better. There's still room for improvement. Yeah, they still struggled to stop Clemson in the ACC championship game. Yeah, Baylor moved the football up and down against them in the bowl game. But that defense still showed much better for themselves last year with Gene Chizik now at the defensive coordinator spot for them. This year, defensive line and secondary, lots of talent and experience coming back. Those 2 levels should be fine. Offense, strength of this team for years. This Larry Fedora, the head coach of this team, his up-tempo offense has really been good for North Carolina. They've been at the top, near the top in college football in terms of many offensive categories for the last few seasons. They do have some question marks, though, especially at quarterback. You got to replace Marquise Williams, who was a pretty good quarterback for this team. That being said, from what I've read, Mitch Trubisky, a guy that got a little bit of playing time last year for North Carolina, Trubisky is getting a lot of good reports, positive reviews, a guy that they expect, is going to play well. He had limited playing time last year, but played well when he did get in. They think he'll be good. They think the offensive line is going to be good. They're loaded with plenty of experience. They've got a great running back combo, 1-2 punch at running back, tremendous receiving core. Ryan Switzer is back. Bug Howard is back. A bunch of targets at wide receiver for Trubisky to throw the football to. So this offense is still probably going to be as explosive, dynamic, and dangerous as they were last year. Can that defense continue to take strides forward? I think they can. They've got more experience this year. Year 2 now of Chizik as the DC, so no adjustments there having to be made. So I think North Carolina, They're going to be even better this year. They're going to be obviously one of the teams contending to win this division and be in the ACC championship game, no question. I like the look of North Carolina. Let's move on to Georgia Tech. Yellow Jackets, pressure on Paul Johnson. I mean, everybody's saying Paul Johnson's washed up. He can't coach anymore. The triple option attack is in the back. It belongs in the dinosaur age. It can't get the job done anymore. 3-9 season last year, no bowl game. I mean, there's a lot of pressure on Paul Johnson, and a lot of criticism is being thrown at him, and some of it is justified. But I don't want to think we can just throw out the triple option as being stale, as not being an offense that can have success anymore here in college football. If you have the personnel to execute that offense, I still think you can have success with it. So we'll see how this triple option attack looks this season. Really, when I look at it, the offensive line's got to be a lot better. I mean, Justin Thomas, the quarterback, did not have a great season last year. He regressed a bit, likely because he was under duress a lot. Offensive line didn't open as many holes for that ground attack last year that is famous, of course, with the triple option. So definitely that offensive line is key for Georgia Tech. If they're going to be able to get this triple option to perform and be rolling and firing on all cylinders, that offensive line is going to have to step up. And that defense was soft as butter last year for Georgia Tech. They were just completely run over in the trenches. Couldn't stop the run. The pass defense was abysmal at times. That's going to have to be better this season. Good news is they have their leading tackler back and linebacker P.J. Davis. A lot of youth in that secondary, though, and you've got some pretty good passing offenses in this conference. North Carolina, Virginia Tech should be improved with that Fuente up-tempo offense. I mean, you've got some tough offenses. Brad Kaya is a good quarterback with Miami, so there's going to be some tough offenses to defend in terms of Georgia Tech with their pass defense, and it wasn't good last year. It's going to have to be a hell of a lot better this year. There's no denying that whatsoever. Lots of pressure on Paul Johnson. If this is another losing season and no bowl game for Georgia Tech, could signal the end of Paul Johnson and his days here in Atlanta with this Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets program. The Miami Hurricanes next up on our Coastal Division preview of the ACC. The Al Golden era had so much promise for it with Miami when he became head coach, but boy, constant disappointment, constant underachievement, and now Miami's turning to Mark Richt, a former Miami alum, former Georgia Bulldogs head coach, to take over and bring this team back to prominence. It's funny because Mark Richt, consistent, steady contender, his Georgia teams there, but always criticized for his lack of ability to win the big games. That's always been an issue for Mark Richt. It's always what he got criticism for. We'll see if he can sort of debunk that theory. He can't win big games because eventually, he can have this team contending. Eventually, if you get to that point, you're going to have to start winning big games or else Miami's going to basically, toss you out just like Georgia did. So from that standpoint, Mark Richt still has his own personal hump that he's got to get over from a coaching standpoint. So, the good news is he's got Brad Kaya at quarterback. He's inheriting a very good one there, threw for over 3,000 yards last season, continues to get better. Offensive line is another, just like with Georgia Tech, very big concern for Miami. They weren't good last season. They got holes to fill there. The ground game, they couldn't run the football at all last year. That's going to have to get better. Defense, strength of the team on paper. The defense, apparently, from what I read, dominated the offense in their spring game earlier this year. So that tells you right there, defense may be ahead of the offense right now. Rick's brought in Manny Diaz, who was a DC at Mississippi State, more blitz-heavy, send pressure at the quarterback type of play caller as a defensive coordinator is Manny Diaz. So that means you're going to have one-on-one coverage in the secondary if they're sending extra blitzers. And that secondary basically, has got a few question marks as well. They are strong at safety, but not a lot of quality depth behind a couple of their better cornerbacks. So, if they get injuries in the secondary, could be a bit of a concerning area for the Miami Hurricanes. They've got a good chance to get off to a great start. They have an easy schedule in September, but October is when it really gets tough. Florida State, North Carolina, Notre Dame, and Virginia Tech all on the Miami schedule in October. That's where the rubber's going to meet the road and we find out how good this team is. Pittsburgh Panthers next up. 8-5 last season. What else is new? 8-5. They make a bowl game, but it's a lower tier bowl game, and really it's a ho-hum season. That's Pitt Panther football in a nutshell for years and years now, and I don't know if it's going to change. I mean, I like Pat Narduzzi, the head coach, former Michigan State defensive coordinator. I like the guy. He does a good job, pretty smart, but he doesn't get the top tier talent, I think, at Pitt that other teams in the ACC can recruit. They're going to have to rely on this running back duo. James Conner back from injury. That should help. Kadre Ollison, who really filled in well for Conner when he was injured. That running game is going to have to be the boatload of production for this offense because I don't trust the quarterback, Nathan Peterman. He's a game manager. He's asked to not make mistakes, short to intermediate thrower. He's not very good with the deep ball. He has very limited weapons at wide receiver. Tyler Boyd moving on. Where is the passing game going to be for this team? I've got real concerns. They're going to have very limited passing attack this year. It's going to put a lot of pressure. Teams are going to stack the box, try to stop the run. Dare Peterman throw the football deep. Find some receivers in light of the fact that they've lost many of their top receivers last year. So that passing game is a real worry for Pitt. Defensive line looks strong. That's the good news. Secondary a bit questionable. They gave up big chunks of yards in the passing game on defense last year. That's going to have to get better. We'll see. I mean, Pitt, they got a tough schedule. Oklahoma State, North Carolina, Miami, Clemson, all on the docket. Pitt's been a terrible team to bet on at home. They've been good on the road and specifically in the underdog role. They might have value point spread wise in that role again this year, but lots of questions with Pitt. I think in the end you need a quarterback eventually at some point to make some plays for it. I'm not sure Peterman consistently does that for this Pitt team. So still some question marks. They're probably going to be same old Pitt. Slip into a bowl game, 6, 7, 8 wins. And go from there. Virginia Cavaliers, Bronco Mendenhall. How about him making the jump here from BYU to Virginia, taking over as head coach? Surprising move. I mean, not only that Bronco left BYU after all the time he had been there, but the destination he chose. I mean, UCLA was calling him. Washington was. There was a bunch of teams that were calling Bronco Mendenhall in years past to be their head coach, but chose Virginia. Waited till this year and then ended up choosing Virginia, nondescript football program that's had 4 straight losing seasons to end the Mike London era, which was a complete disaster. So Bronco Mendenhall brought in he's bringing in his former BYU offensive coordinator Robert Anae. They're going to be a more aggressive, up-tempo style of offense with hopefully a more mobile quarterback like what BYU had with Taysom Hill. That's usually when they've been at their best. So very interesting to see how this more of an aggressive, up-tempo offense translates because they have Matt Johns returning as a quarterback, but he's not a great running quarterback, and you could argue he's not a great throwing quarterback either at times. So again, who's that quarterback going to be? A big question. Defense also going to deal with a scheme change. They're going from 3-3-5 to 3-4 defense with new defensive coordinator Nick Howell, another guy that Bronco brought from BYU, from his coaching staff there to take over as the DC here with Virginia. Just 5 starters back on defense for Virginia, so that's a little bit concerning. Secondary, a lot of experience back, but that secondary was not good last year. 97th against the pass, so very questionable team right now. The good news is I think they're going to be power rated low. They're going to be underdogs in most games. I respect Bronco Mendenhall and his ability to coach. He's done a great job at BYU, in tough situations. I think they can be an ATS moneymaker this year. I think you can cash some tickets this season with Virginia. I really believe that. They're going to be very low rated. Maybe a chance for them to be an under the radar ticket casher this season. And we'll wrap up the the Coastal Division of the ACC with Duke. Duke 8-5 last season. You got to respect David Cutcliffe. Just does a tremendous job with this team. Although again, Cutcliffe though, a couple of question marks this year. Only 10 starters returning overall from last year's team, so that's going to be something you're going to want to watch out for. Thomas Sirk to me, just really had some glimpses of playing well, but has also struggled at times. That's going to be something you're going to want to watch out for. The defense to me was not good at times last year. It seems like the better offenses really had their way with this Duke defense. They're going to have to get better on that side of the football. The defensive front was terrible in terms of getting pressure on the quarterback last year. That's definitely going to have to improve. And the problem is, they have one returning starter up front on that defensive line. That's a real concern. So if you couldn't generate a pass rush last year, you could be in tough to do so this year. Little worried about Duke. I'm not really high on this team. They could be in tough in this division. I respect the hell out of David Cutcliffe. Done a magnificent job turning this team around, making them a legitimate program again, a competitive, program, but I'm just not sure they have the personnel this time around this season to really make a dent in what's a competitive ACC Coastal Division. So I'm not exactly expecting a great outlook for the Duke Blue Devils here in 2016. All right, that's going to wrap up my look at the ACC Coastal Division. Next week we're going to move on and we're going to talk about the Big Ten next week. Big Ten Conference. Everybody talking about Michigan threatening Ohio State in that conference for supremacy. We'll see if I agree with that sentiment next week when I preview the Big Ten prior to the upcoming college football season.
Always on the go? Bet365 has one of the top mobile platforms in today's market. Sign up today and don't let your busy life keep you out of the game.